The first thing Eli Mercer saw was a torn dress and a pair of shaking hands trying to hold it closed. For one hard second, from where he stood in the dirt behind the sheriff's house, it looked like he was the kind of man who would step forward and take advantage of a broken woman. His boot stopped inches from her shoulder. The wind off the Santa Cruz River lifted the dust around them. She lay twisted in the dirt, like something thrown away, chest rising in sharp, uneven breaths. Then her fingers moved. They tightened over the torn fabric at her ribs, like it was the last piece of dignity she had left in this world. Her voice came out rough and barely holding together. "Don't. That's off limits." Eli froze. His hand had been halfway down, not to harm her, but to check if she was breathing steady. Still, he understood what it must have looked like. A large rancher standing over a young woman with her dress ripped open behind a lawman's house. He pulled his hand back slowly. He stepped away just enough so she could see his face clearly. "I ain't touching you," he said, low and steady. He untied the worn blanket rolled behind his saddle, shook the dust from it, and laid it over her without letting his fingers brush her skin. The movement was careful, respectful. A man who had buried his wife during the fever year of 1878 did not forget what pain looked like. She blinked up at him, confused at first. Then something in her eyes shifted. Not trust yet, but not fear either. Eli glanced toward the back door of the house. It was wide open. He had come to speak with Pima County Sheriff Asa Whitmore about missing cattle, yet about wagon tracks too heavy for honest freight, about riders who traveled at night and never used the main roads. Instead, he found the sheriff's daughter half-beaten in the dirt. "You fit to talk?" Eli asked. She shook her head, then stopped, then nodded, like even she did not know which answer was true. "My father," she whispered. "He can't know I got out here." Eli felt something heavy settle in his chest. He looked at the house again, then at the river behind him, then back at her. He knew that look, the look of someone standing at the edge of something rotten. He crouched, keeping distance between them. "What's your name?" "Clara." "Clara Whitmore?" he asked carefully. She gave a small nod. That made everything worse. He helped her sit up slowly, making sure the blanket stayed between them, yet she kept one arm tight across her ribs, not protecting bruises, but something else, something hidden. They moved down toward the edge of the Santa Cruz River, far enough that if a horse came riding back too fast, they would hear it first. Eli scooped water in his palm and held it out. She drank like she had not had a quiet moment in days. Then she said it. "He's selling them." Eli did not rush her. He just waited. "Chinese girls," she continued, voice tired but steady now. "Through Benson, down to Tombstone. They don't come back." The wind shifted. "That's a big thing to say about a sheriff," Eli replied. "I know." He studied her face. She was not speaking wild. She was not speaking confused. "What you hiding under that dress?" he asked gently. Clara hesitated. Then, with slow hands, she reached inside the lining of her torn hem and pulled it open just enough to reveal folded paper stitched into place. Names, dates, train times, payments. Eli felt the world tilt slightly. "Why didn't he take it?" Eli asked. "He tried," she said. "He tore my dress looking for it. I stitched it into the hem last night. Told him I burned it. That meant one thing. He'll come back," Eli said. She nodded. And when Asa Whitmore came back and realized what was missing, he would not be calm. Eli stood up slowly, brushing dust from his hands. This was no longer about cattle. This was about money, about power, about men who believed no one would question them because they wore a badge. "I was heading home," Eli said quietly. "That was the plan." Clara gave a weak smile. "Sounds like a good plan." It did sound good. Yeah, but he looked at her again. Not just at the bruises, not just at the fear. He saw something else. She had decided not to break. That decided it for him. "Can you ride?" he asked. "I can try." "That'll have to do. Because if they stayed, Asa would return, and if they ran, he would follow. Either way, this would not end quiet." Eli helped her onto the saddle, steady but careful. She climbed as much as she could on her own. She winced once, but did not complain. They rode along the dry edge of the river, keeping low and avoiding the main trail. About a mile out, Eli saw them. Fresh prints cutting across the dust behind them. 2 riders, maybe 3. "They're already looking," he muttered. Clara did not turn around. "I told you he would." Eli tightened his jaw. Whatever Clara Whitmore had stitched into that dress, that men were already willing to hurt her for it. The only question left was how far they were willing to go to get it back, and how far he was willing to stand in their way. Eli did not slow the horse. The riders behind them were not guessing anymore. They were tracking. The prints in the dust were sharp and fresh, cutting straight across the river edge like men who knew exactly who they were chasing. Clara held tight to the saddle horn, her jaw set. She did not look back again. She did not need to. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "No," Eli replied. "They won't." He turned them off the faint trail and pushed toward an old cattle cabin, half forgotten near a bend in the river. The place had been built years ago for winter storms. Now it leaned slightly to one side, boards gray and tired. It was not good enough to hide long, but it would buy them time. Inside, the air smelled like old wood and dust. Eli checked the window slats, the back wall, then finally let himself breathe. Clara eased down onto a crate, one hand still pressed to her ribs. With careful fingers, she reached into her dress again and pulled the folded paper free this time. Eli stepped close enough to read without touching it. Names written in tight rows, dates that matched rail schedules, payment amounts marked beside each one. At the bottom, one word circled. "Benson." "You ever been there?" Clara asked. "Enough," Eli said. "Trains don't ask questions." "No trails, no witnesses," she replied. Silence settled between them for a moment. "If we run," Clara said, "they disappear." "And if we don't run," Eli answered, "they come after you hard." Her eyes did not waver. "Well, there's still one there," she said. He frowned. "One what?" "One girl. I heard them before he locked me in. They couldn't move her yet." That changed everything. This was no longer just proof. It was not just paper and ink. It was a living person waiting in a rail yard somewhere, counting hours she did not understand. "You sure about this?" Eli asked. Clara nodded once. No hesitation this time. "I'm done being scared." That was all he needed. They rode again, harder now. They switched horses at a small Mexican vaquero's place west of the main trail. Eli knew the man from cattle drives. No questions were asked, just fresh mounts and a quiet nod. By the time they reached Benson the next afternoon, both of them were worn thin. Dust clung to their clothes. Clara's face looked pale beneath the sun. But the paper was still dry, still worth killing for. They did not ride straight in. Eli pulled the horses up on a low ridge overlooking the rail yard. The air felt heavy. Long shadows stretched across the depot. Below them, 2 wagons sat backed up near a rail car, already hooked and waiting. Men moved calmly, practiced, not rushed, not nervous, routine. "That's them," Clara said under her breath. This was not a hidden crime done in darkness. This was business. "Stay behind me," Eli said. She nodded. They circled wide, tied the horses out of sight, and moved in on foot along the backside of the storage sheds. One lookout should have been outside, but he had wandered off, likely thinking the job was already finished. The kind of mistake men make when they feel untouchable. Eli stopped at the corner of a shed and listened. Voices inside. Rough. Impatient. One voice stood out. Cold. Controlled. The kind of tone a man uses when he believes he owns the room. Clara's breathing changed. She already knew. They slipped through a half-open door. The smell hit first. Old wood. Dust. And something else. Fear. In the far corner, behind stacked crates, 3 women sat on the dirt floor, wrists tied, faces tight with exhaustion. One of them looked up fast, eyes sharp despite everything. Not broken yet. "Lin Yui," Clara whispered. The girl blinked, surprised to hear her name spoken gently. Eli moved fast. He crouched, cutting rope with quick, practiced hands. No wasted motion, no loud words. Clara knelt beside Lin Yui, speaking low and steady, reassuring her in soft tones. Then a boot scraped outside. Eli froze. The door slammed open. A man stepped in, gun already rising. "Well now," he said, slow and mean. "That saves me the trouble." Eli lunged forward just as the shot cracked, knocking the barrel aside. The bullet tore into the wall. The man swung wild, younger and faster, but angry. Eli took the hit and stayed on his feet. He drove his elbow into the man's jaw and closed the distance. It was not pretty. No fancy moves, just fists and grit, and the kind of strength that comes from years working cattle under a burning sun. Behind them, Clara pulled Lin Yui to her feet. "Go," Clara whispered. Another shot rang out from outside. More men. Eli felt it before he heard it. A voice from the doorway. Cold. "Clara." Everything stopped for half a second. She turned slowly. Sheriff Asa Whitmore stood in the doorway, hat low, gun steady. His face was calm. Not a father's face, but not a man worried about his daughter, just a man protecting his business. "You should have stayed quiet," Asa said. His voice did not rise. That was the worst part. Clara straightened. She did not step back this time. "You were supposed to protect people," she said. Eli shifted slightly, putting himself just enough between her and the gun. Asa's eyes flicked to him. "You don't understand what it takes to keep order," Asa said. "Men like you think things are simple." Eli answered steady. "I know one thing. You don't get to call it law when you're selling human beings." That was enough. The tension snapped. Asa fired. The shot echoed through the shed like thunder trapped in wood. Eli moved before the sound fully settled. Something hot tore across his shoulder, burning deep, but he did not stop. And he drove forward with everything he had left and slammed into Asa Whitmore hard enough to send them both crashing into stacked crates. The sheriff's hat flew off. His gun clattered across the floor. Outside, boots pounded against dirt. Another man shouted. Clara did not freeze this time. She shoved Lin Yui and the other women toward the back door. "Run toward the river," she said. "Don't stop." Inside, Eli and Asa struggled in the dust and broken wood. Asa was strong. Older, but not weak. He fought with the anger of a man who believed he had already won too much to lose now. "You think this land runs on kindness?" Asa growled. Eli did not answer. He drove his fist forward and forced the man's arm down until the fight drained from him. Not to kill, not for revenge, just to end it. The gun lay between them. Eli kicked it out of reach and stood slowly, breathing hard. His shoulder burned. Blood soaked into his shirt, but it was not enough to drop him. Asa lay on his back, staring at the ceiling beams, like he had finally reached the end of something he had been building for years. Outside, more shots cracked. Then, new voices. Different voices. "United States Marshal!" someone shouted. Clara stood frozen near the doorway. Her eyes moved from her father to the outside yard. Men on fresh horses rode in fast. Badges flashed in the late afternoon light. The depot clerk stood behind them, pale but steady. Clara had not run blindly. Weeks earlier, when she first overheard the shipments, she had slipped a note to that same clerk. A desperate message asking for federal help if her father ever came for her. The clerk had waited, watched. And when armed men and bound women filled his depot yard again, he wired Tucson without hesitation. The marshals moved quickly. Guns were taken. Hands were bound. The wagons were opened. Inside one rail car, they found chains bolted to the floor. That was enough. Lin Yui and the others were led outside gently, blankets wrapped around their shoulders. One of them began to cry. Not from fear, from relief. Clara stood still while two marshals pulled Asa to his feet. For the first time, he did not look like a sheriff. He looked like a man who had finally run out of places to hide. Their eyes met once. No shouting, no pleading, just silence. Eli stepped outside into the fading light. His shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat, but he remained upright. A marshal approached him. "You the one who started this?" the man asked. Eli glanced toward Clara. "She did," he said quietly. The marshal looked at her with new respect. Night settled over Benson slow and heavy. The rail yard, once calm and practiced, now buzzed with federal men writing reports and securing prisoners. The routine had been broken. Clara sat on a wooden crate near the depot wall, a fresh bandage wrapped around her ribs. She looked smaller now that the fight was over, but not weaker. Eli walked toward her, hat in hand. "You could have stayed quiet," he said. She gave a faint smile. "So could you." They sat there for a moment, watching the marshals work. "What happens now?" she asked. "Your father stands trial," Eli answered. "The others too." "And me?" He looked at her carefully. "You get to choose." She nodded slowly. She would not go back to that house, and she would not carry his name like a shield for someone else's crimes. She had already stepped across that line the moment she said she was done being scared. A few days later, Clara left Benson with the women who had been rescued. She planned to travel east first, then somewhere new, somewhere that did not know her as a sheriff's daughter. Eli returned to his ranch along the Santa Cruz. The cattle were still there. The fences still needed mending. The sun still rose the same way it always had. But he was not the same man. Sometimes doing the right thing does not make life easier. It does not bring back what was lost. It does not erase scars. It just makes a man able to look at himself when the day is done. Weeks later, word spread across the territory about Sheriff Asa Whitmore's arrest. Some men shook their heads in disbelief. Others admitted they had seen signs, but never asked questions, because the line between peace and silence had always been thin out here. Clara wrote once, a short letter, no return address. She said Lin Yui had found work in San Francisco with a family who treated her kindly. She said she was learning to live without fear. She did not mention her father again. Eli folded the letter and tucked it into the same drawer where he once kept his wife's picture, not because he was replacing the past, but because some choices change the shape of a life forever. Out in the Wild West, law was not always written in books. Sometimes it was written in the moment a man heard someone say, "Don't, that's off limits," and chose to step back, or chose to step forward.